What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to the show. It's Friday, June 17th, 2011. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. It's end of the week. Pauhana Friday. Looking forward to what we hope will be a relaxing weekend. Of course, everything's kind of up in the air right now. Before we get into the show here, I just want to comment on two of the stories that we just heard on the news break, where they're talking about how they've dropped charges against Osama bin Laden because, after all, we've killed him. And it's such an obvious attempt to keep the propaganda going. We just killed Osama bin Laden. And I mean, you know, yeah, he's gone. Whether you know that he died of natural causes almost 10 years ago, or you believe the propaganda that he was killed the 1st of May, it doesn't matter. Why are they reporting on what they even admit is a routine procedural situation of dropping the charges and clearing the court docket? It's a non-story. Nothing has happened. They're basically getting up there and saying, nothing has happened, and nothing will happen. Film at 11. And it's more propaganda. They're still trying to say, see, we got bin Laden. We got Osama bin Laden. No, you didn't. He died of his own bodily problems here almost 10 years ago. But it's just part of that whole propaganda thing because, President Obama, this is about all he's got to run on in 2012. I'm the guy who got bin Laden. Death by Photoshop. And so forth. So that's kind of a real obvious example of the propaganda that we're getting on there. And the other story, of course, is where they're talking about this nuclear plant, actually two nuclear plants in Nebraska. We actually published the level of flood water and the point at which there is going to be a problem with these nuclear power plant buildings flooding, and it's like within 6 inches of doing it right now. And the media is saying, but the regulatory authorities in the plant say there's no reason to worry. Well, they were telling us that the first day of Fukushima. And based on the information we're getting from further up the river about the dams are running at maximum, we published that information yesterday. Not to mention that caller we had calling in from Montana. There is worse to come. And they're already saying that if the water goes just another 6 inches higher, then they're looking at the actual building, the reactor building, the power station building beginning to flood. And that's when we start seeing cooling systems short out and shut down. So we're keeping an eye on that situation. We'll be talking a little bit more about that later in the show. Meanwhile, the phone lines are open, 877-342-6673, 877-342-6673. Brett is in the control room twiddling the dials, feeding the giant mutant hamster in that wire wheel that powers all of these electronics, and answering your calls when you call in. Now, the big news is that some of the boats of the Freedom Flotilla II have set sail to begin the assembly for the eventual arrival in Gaza later this month. Basically, June 21st, all the boats are meeting in Athens, Greece, to form up this giant flotilla, which is going to go down to Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid, building supplies, medical supplies, cookies, toys for the kids, exactly the same thing they were doing last year. Israel is pulling out all the stops to try and either bribe or threaten governments to get in the way, to interfere. They're threatening to once again attack the aid flotilla and possibly kill more people. And they're out there already with the propaganda. Remember last year, when they attacked the aid flotilla, they tried to jam all the communications on the flotilla so they could go in there, do whatever they wanted, and then afterwards said, oh, they were really bad people. We had no choice but to go in there and just shoot them all. Fortunately, their jamming did not work. I'm expecting they're probably going to have more powerful equipment this year, paid for by the American taxpayer, I might add. And they'll go back in and they'll commit another atrocity, and the U.S. government will do nothing about it, and Israel will say, they made us do it, Mommy. They were mean. They had cookies of mass destruction. We can't let them take those cookies into Gaza. What if they throw them over the wall and hit my poodle? Or whatever it is they're going to say. But it looks like there's going to be another confrontation, and my hat is off to those people on those ships, because they know their lives are in danger. They are as courageous as those pilots who flew the Berlin airlift back in 1948, 1949. They're more courageous because their own government will not back them up in the case of the American people. The Americans who are sailing on the Audacity of Hope and these other aid ships are sailing without the support and backup of their own government, because the government of the United States of America is completely under the control of Israel. And we found that out last year. When Israel attacked the aid flotilla in international waters, they took several Americans prisoner. They killed 8 people, one of them a 19-year-old boy from New York City. Carrying his American passport, they put him on the deck and put 4 bullets into his head without any reason. He had a camera. That was it. He had a camera of mass destruction. And then they turned around and said, well, he deserved it. We told him not to do anything. You know something? Under the law of the sea, in international waters, people can go wherever they want to go. What Israel did last year was an act of piracy, to be most generous. It was an act of piracy at absolute worst. It was an act of war. And they're getting ready to do it again. And they're trying to create the propaganda and political environment to say, oh, it's all the fault of those gosh darn people and their cookies of mass destruction. Now, what's going on here, and I want you all to keep this in mind in the coming weeks as this story continues to unfold. Last year, after the attack on the first flotilla and the global condemnation of Israel for this atrocity on the high seas, McClatchy newspapers published official Israeli government documents that confirmed the starvation blockade of Gaza has nothing to do with Israel's security. They are attempting to starve the people of Gaza into abandoning their elected government, Hamas, and accepting proxy Israeli rule through Fatah. That's not even operative anymore because Fatah and Hamas have basically united. And they're going to go to the United Nations and declare a Palestinian state, which Israel's trying to find some way to stop that as well. But last year, when Israel attacked a U.S.-flagged ship, which is sovereign U.S. territory under international law, and they took American citizens prisoner without provocation, and they murdered one in cold blood, our government did nothing at all. Now, just imagine for a minute. I mean, the similarities are really quite there. You have this conquering imperial nation, Israel, that is trying to basically take over Gaza. And nearby there are some ships and some Americans that Israel is concerned might be in the way. Well, we've been in that situation before because, back in 1941, we had this conquering imperialist nation called Japan. And they were trying to take over some neighboring countries like China and the Dutch East Indies, the Philippines, for the oil fields down there. And nearby there were some ships and Americans that Japan thought might get in the way at a place called Pearl Harbor. It's out this window over here. And Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and they killed Americans, and they attacked U.S.-flagged ships. Now, just imagine, if Franklin Roosevelt had gone up to the U.S. Congress and said, really, from the point of view of the Japanese, they had a really good reason to kill Americans. We shouldn't get upset about that. How long do you think he would have stayed president? And yet, a year ago, President Obama goes up to the Congress and says exactly the same thing. And the Congress says, oh, yes, Israel has a right to kill Americans who might be bringing cookies to those gosh darn Palestinians. And the United States even went up to the United Nations to protect Israel from the diplomatic backlash of this. You want to talk about a sellout government? You want to talk about high treason? The president's job is to take care of Americans and America. The Congress's job is to take care of Americans and America. That's the way it's supposed to work. And instead we have a government, Congress and president, who are so concerned with Israel that they're willing to turn their back on you, the American people. That when you understand the war crime, the crime against humanity being committed in Gaza to starve these people into surrendering their elected government and accepting foreign rule through a proxy, and you want to take them food, medicine that is being denied to them by Israel, and Israel's going to shoot you, and you know that your government will not protect you, will not back you up. That's the situation that these people on these aid boats are sailing into. They all deserve medals. They all deserve the Peace Prize. In fact, if anybody's... I can't nominate anybody for the Peace Prize because you have to already have one to get one. So I don't know who it is who nominated Al Gore, but I want to step on their toes. Next year's Nobel Peace Prize ought to go to this aid flotilla because they're working for peace. They're taking food and medicine and building supplies into Gaza. They're breaking the blockade. They are standing up to Israel the way America stood up to the Soviet Union in 1948, and they all deserve heroes' recognition. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the Freedom Flotilla II. We're talking about Israel basically throwing a tantrum that the world refuses to do what Israel thinks the world should be doing, which is to let them go ahead just stealing more of Palestinian land. Because that invisible man in the cloud said so. That's why. And, of course, right now their big panic is that Israel is insisting Palestine does not have the right to declare itself a free and independent nation, which is kind of what Great Britain was saying about the American colonies back there in 1776. The problem, of course, historically is that Israel came into existence with a simple declaration. When Israel rejected the original United Nations partition plan, that would have created two states, an Israel and a Palestine side by side. David Ben-Gurion rejected that because Israel wanted it all. And he simply said, I declare Israel in existence. And 24 hours later, Harry Truman, being goaded by Chaim Weizmann, said, yeah, I recognize Israel, and that's it. And from that day to this, Israel has said, we have a right to exist, but nobody else does. And it's that inherent unfairness, that unwillingness to grant to the Palestinians that which Israel demands for itself, that is the root cause of all the misery and pain and bloodshed, not to mention the impoverishment of the American taxpayer and the subversion of our Congress. From that day to this, that's what it's all about. Israel wants everybody to say, yeah, you have a right to exist, but they don't want to give that same right to Palestine. And Israel refuses to draw their borders. And, Israel keeps saying, Palestine must recognize our right to exist first. But Palestine can't know what they're recognizing if Israel won't draw their borders, and they never have. Palestine could say, all right, we recognize Israel's right to exist. And Israel said, well, our borders are way out over there past that port, so you got to move out now because this is our country. And you recognized it. So Israel is now threatened. Israel is worried that the new combined coalition governments of Hamas and Fatah are going to go to the United Nations this fall. And they're going to say, we are an independent nation, and right now it looks like the majority of the UN member states are going to ratify Palestinian statehood. This is a General Assembly vote, which means the United States cannot veto like they do in the Security Council. And so if it gets to the United Nations, it will happen. And Israel's trying to find some way to prevent that from happening. And their latest move is, Israel is saying that if the United Nations recognizes Palestine, Israel will immediately declare war on Palestine and simply annex it all. Kill everybody, bomb the heck out of the place, and say, it's all Israel now, so there. UN, you think you're going to tell us what to do? Which, of course, will discredit the United Nations as any kind of a foundation or a template for an eventual global government, which is what the UN, that's the job the UN wants. They want to be boss of the whole world. But they can't handle little tiny Israel. And Israel is already in violation of the conditions placed on its UN membership, and the UN still can't stand up to them. So they're acting like really, really spoiled brats. And just to give you another indicator of just how completely subverted by Israel the United States government is, at a time when we have massive unemployment and homelessness and hunger and all these other problems, infrastructure, floods, nuclear power plants about to be submerged, oil and Corexit in the Gulf of Mexico, radiation from Japan showering all over the country. So what does Senator Mark Kirk of Illinois spend his time worrying about? Senator Mark Kirk of Illinois wants the United States Navy to block the aid flotilla to Gaza. That's what Mark Kirk wants the U.S. Navy to do. Just get in the way and make sure the cookies and candies and Band-Aids and penicillin and all the rest of the building supplies cannot get through to Gaza, because by golly, Mark Kirk of Illinois is going to remember who his boss really is and who he really works for. Senator Mark Kirk has brought a great deal of shame down on himself and the entire U.S. Senate. Not that they needed much help anyway. The U.S. Navy ought to be escorting the aid ships to Gaza to break Israel's starvation of blockade of Gaza, just as American aircraft helped to break the Soviet starvation blockade of West Berlin in 1949. Senator Kirk clearly has forgotten the history of the United States of America and what the United States of America is supposed to stand for. Senator Kirk is ignoring the opinion of the majority of the American people who support the creation of a Palestinian state and an end to the starvation blockade. Senator Kirk has apparently forgotten that last year Israel murdered a 19-year-old American in cold blood in international waters. Senator Kirk has clearly forgotten who it is he's supposed to work for in his haste to serve his Israeli masters. And this gets back to that little bit of wisdom that I want everybody to keep in mind as we head into the 2012 election season. No government can serve two masters. And a government that serves Israel cannot serve the American people. A friend to Israel is no friend of America, certainly not after Israel guns down, kids from New York in cold blood. At this time in our history, with the economic problems, the wars, the collapsing infrastructure, all the problems we have, America needs leaders who will put America first, second, and third. Let me repeat that last one for you again. America needs leaders who will put America first, second, and third. If we don't get leaders into power who put America first, second, and third, then the nation truly is lost. We are but a vassal state of Israel. Now, continuing that wonderful tendency to basically just lash out in all directions when they don't get what they want, the spoiled brats in Israel, has once again sent troops into Lebanon. They're crossing the border. That is, by the way, considered an act of war. Israel usually excuses it by saying, well, the border really is kind of a floating thing. And, there was that situation about a year ago where they were coming across the border to clear trees away because Israel has a right to peek into other people's countries unimpeded. So now there's a new incursion on the ground and in the air. And I'm sure Israel will say, they made us do it, Mommy. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're finishing up on this story about how Israel has once again gone into Lebanon. They want that Litani River. They want it so much they can taste it. All they got to do is figure out a way to make it look like it's Lebanon's fault. And so apparently yesterday, an Israeli reconnaissance plane flew over Lebanon for almost 24 hours. Now, the Lebanese are showing a great deal of restraint in not trying to shoot it down. Today, 4 Israeli warplanes violated Lebanese airspace flying over different parts of the country for about 2 hours. Now, a couple of things are going on here. One, Israel's trying to find out how Lebanon's air defenses are set up. And Lebanon, by not actually doing anything, is denying them that intelligence. The other situation, of course, is that Israel is hoping that Lebanon will take a shot at one of the airplanes so that they can go out and say, Lebanon is shooting at us. And, of course, the media won't tell you that, hey, you were over their territory without permission. You remember back on Election Day 2008 when we were all distracted watching President Obama win his office? That's when Israel broke a 6-month ceasefire and attacked Gaza and killed 6 Hamas officials. And then the next day, Hamas said, well, I guess the ceasefire's over. And then Israel said, aha, Hamas says the ceasefire is over. And they launched Operation Cast Lead. And the media here in the United States of America kept focusing on the fact that, the ceasefire was over and Hamas said the war is on. They didn't mention the 6-month ceasefire had been broken by Israel. Israel's goal is to always make it look like the other people started the war so that Israel can go on and do what Israel wants to do, which is stealing more of the other people's land. And you've got to keep a very, very close eye on that because, Israel's back there going into Lebanon, trying to grab people, trying to grab important people that they can use for leverage. Remember how the last war in Lebanon began. 2 Israeli soldiers in uniform walked across the border, walked into a town in Lebanon, where immediately, because they're soldiers in the uniform of a foreign country there without permission, they were arrested. Remember how the media portrayed it? Oh, the Lebanese Hezbollah, they've kidnapped these Israeli soldiers. How could they? Their families are just waiting for them to come home. And they tried to make it look like Lebanon had just, for the heck of it, grabbed these 2 Israeli soldiers. Lebanon's not that stupid. Hezbollah's not that stupid. They know better than to just go out and do a provocation. They're going out of their way to avoid provocations. But that's how the last Lebanon war started. And now here we are. Israel's never gotten over the fact that they didn't really accomplish much of anything in the last Lebanon war. So here they are. The troops are back in Lebanon again. They're trying to provoke a response so they can say, Lebanon made us do it. We had to go in there. Lebanon made us do it. Now moving on to some of the numerous other wars that we're covering here. As you're probably aware, Obama is trying to evade a confrontation with the United States Congress by saying that Libya isn't really a war. It's sort of war light. It's a war simulation. It's war mania. Not a real war, but an incredible simulation. And saying because U.S. soldiers are not decisively engaged on the ground that it's not really a war. Now, of course, members of Congress basically came back and said there are American warplanes dropping American bombs on the Libyan people. That's a war. That's hostilities. And that is a war. And the commander-in-chief must, under the War Powers Act, seek congressional approval for this 3-month-old military operation. He's already passed the deadline. He's acting outside his constitutional authority. And rather than seek congressional approval, because he knows he's not going to get it going into an election year, the American people have had it with all these wars, and the members of Congress who are up for re-election understand if they vote for more war, they are toast. And so Obama is trying to figure out some way that he can keep the war going without needing permission. But that's not the way the country was set up. This country was not set up to allow the president to be a king or an emperor and simply go out and fling wars in all directions. War is declared by the United States Congress. The president only has the unquestioned authority to commit military forces to deal with an emergency, with a crisis. And in this era of global instant communications, even 90 days is longer than the president needs to stabilize the situation and get Congress's permission to continue. Obama is operating outside his legal authority here. Now, in order to try and continue to sell this story that we must be in Libya for something, they're still pushing, all these various hoaxes, and they keep coming back to this rape thing because, after all, we're Americans and we respond when women get raped, unless it's by Kellogg, Root and Brown or Halliburton, and then we're supposed to look the other way. And they're out there, Gaddafi's giving them Viagra and blah, blah. Which, again, remember about a week ago I said that's kind of a silly piece of propaganda because it makes Gaddafi's men look like pussies? They got to have Viagra to go out and attack the women. Well, they've changed the story. They stopped the Viagra story. Now they're saying, wow, CNN said rebel forces have found mobile phone footage, on Gaddafi's people committing all this raping and torture and everything. The story fell apart almost immediately, and it never got any traction. And I'm going to tell you why. If you are with CNN and you are listening to this show, I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight. You need to understand that the American people are not going to get excited or enraged by media stories of sexual assault in far-off places on the other side of the world. At the same time, the media has been telling us that we should not become upset when the TSA runs their hands all over our wives and daughters right before our eyes. You cannot have it both ways. TSA fondling your family members, don't get upset. Allegations of rape on the other side of the planet, you should be furious and ready to throw your children into the war. You don't get it both ways. Pick one and go with that. Otherwise, you're just looking silly. We're going to go to the phones. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, the thing is, I was hearing, the Congress has no legal precedent to to file suit. Well, yes, they do. July 25th, 1973, a federal judge ruled the secret war in Cambodia was unconstitutional.
Oh, that's absolutely right. Well, they don't need to go to court. They're going to court to evade what they should be doing, which, of course, is articles of impeachment.
Exactly.
If the president violates the War Powers Act, that is a high crime. And the Congress, the House of Representatives, has the legal right and the moral obligation to impeach him. And then the Senate tries him and possibly removes him from office. The man is operating out of control. He is getting us into more and more wars. Now they're talking about going into Syria for no reason whatsoever, because they're being mean to the lesbian bloggers who turn out to be these phony guys, trying to sell us another war. The president is not complying with the constitutional limits on his office. Congress has the right and the duty to impeach him. They're going through this whole court thing to drag it out, because the real purpose of this is to look like they're trying to stand up to the president for the voters for next year's election, but they're not really going to do anything to stop him. This is all for show. This is all election campaign stuff.
Well, the thing is, if I was in Congress, I'd be called, if I couldn't, I'd be drawing up articles of impeachment, but I'd be bringing the top commanders into the Pentagon, and I'd be looking for ways to have them relieved of duty, because they know better than to go drop bombs on a sovereign country when they ain't got an authorization from Congress.
Well, they're stealing down on Wall Street.
All righty, we got to take a break for commercials, so hang on, and we will be right back.
We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in Gaza tonight.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And George, I believe you're still there on the other end of this telephone line.
Yes, I am.
Got anything more to say?
The thing is, another thing they want to sort of like control the internet, because, the thing is with the internet, I get to talk to people in other countries, and, the people of Russia, they have sympathy for us, and the sad thing is, in their media, they're talking about Russia might have to show of force to the Americans and to the Israelis, like they say, you better knock this off, because we ain't going to put up with it
isn't that
longer.
The weirdest thing? It's like compared to, I was raised to think, the Russians, bad people, they're communists, and the Chinese, they're also communists, and you're supposed to hate them. And here we are, and it's the Chinese and the Russians who are behaving like adults and trying to calm everything down. And the U.S. and Israel are acting like spoiled children, and they're throwing tantrums and saying, you won't give us back our money, I'm going to throw bombs at you. And, it's this weird thing, To think of the Russians and the Chinese as the global peacemakers, that's just unreal. I hope it doesn't come. Go ahead.
Well, also too, it's like talking to a soldier that is ETS out of service. He's planning on dropping off the radar because he don't want to be called back, whatever. But he told me it's like the military is in no shape to go start other wars. I said the equipment is wear and teared. I mean, they got no spare parts. The people are worn down, and it's like, we can't afford another war. It's that the military is about ready to implode.
We can't afford the wars that we're in right now, which is why it's amazing that the money junkies are still out there, pushing forward, because they've run out of people to loan them more money for more mayhem. And, not everybody who invests in a war really does make money, because you can bet on the wrong side. The only ones making money on the war are the bankers from whom everybody's borrowing the money.
Like I say, this way I'm praying for Greece. I'm hoping they default, and I hope all the other European countries default, saying, we ain't paying this debt, we don't owe it, and I just hope the bankers just implode. Because really, I think these ruling families, these bankers... Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, it's really interesting that you would say that, because we just had a member post a story at whatreallyhappened.com where it says economists and the corporate media are warning of global Armageddon scenarios as the masses riot. And it's kind of a fun story to read, because when you read it, the point of view is completely from the point of view of the bankers about how important it is to force the people of the world to pony up all the money to cover all these shortfalls. But again, remember, under a debt-based currency system, it is impossible to ever pay off all the debt. And so it's just an excuse to go out there and say, you got to give us all your money because, wow, we got all this debt to the bank and stuff. And that debt never existed, that compound interest debt. It's a bookkeeping entry. The money that it's supposed to represent never, ever existed to begin with. It's a phantom. It's an absolute phantom. And so, basically the whole screed that we're seeing from the corporate media and from the bankers is you've got to give us what's left of your money because that's the only way to save the financial system. And it won't save the financial system because when you have private central banks issuing the public currency at interest, you are going to have an eventual collapse. And all they can do at the end is grab more and more money to themselves to hold off that collapse so that they can keep on sending pictures of themselves naked to porn stars on their cell phones. But it's going to collapse anyway. And the time has come for the American people to make a choice because you really only have two choices. You can either allow the United States government and economy to drag you down into abject poverty with them, or you can quit throwing good money after bad, stop contributing to the system, and just let them go anyway, because they're going to go down one way or the other. The only choice you have is, will you let yourself get taken down with them, or are you going to stand up and say, we the people will not pay for the bankers' recklessness and criminality? You guys in the government got into this mess without our permission. You can bloody well get out of it without our help, or not. Go ahead and collapse, but you're going to do it without us. And that's the message that the people of Iceland stood up and delivered to their government and their bankers. That's the message the people of Egypt stood up and delivered to their government and their bankers. That's the message that the people of Greece are standing up and delivering to their bankers and their government. Spain is about to blow. Britain, end of this month. Ireland after that. It has to come to the United States of America because the money junkies can't stop themselves. They're hopelessly addicted. They're hopelessly, hopelessly addicted. They will take the last penny out of your pocket. They'll take the last piece of bread out of the mouths of your children, and it will still not be enough to pay off all this debt because the system is designed to always produce more debt than it does wealth.
The thing is about a little microcosm of money junkies. There's in Texas, there's a little debate right now. This owner of a Formula One or Grand Prix wants the city of Austin to build a racetrack for them, a Formula One racetrack. They want the city of Austin to pay for it and maintain it, but yet he gets to keep the profits.
That's a money junkie, all right. I mean, I can see the city of Austin building that track if they're going to profit from the eventual revenues. I mean, that's the whole justification behind any community paying for a professional sports arena is that you expect that you will raise revenue. You'll get your investment back and a little bit of profit. But yeah, for somebody to come in and say, build me a Formula One racetrack and make the taxpayers pay for it and I get to keep it all, yeah, that's money junkie thinking.
Well, my brother, he lives up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I say one thing. He's getting nice returns being a taxpayer for the city of Green Bay because the football team, they get a nice return. If there's ever going to be a sports team, Green Bay is the model.
Well, there are ways to make it work, and the problem is when it doesn't work, it's usually because you've got money junkies and corruption, and the money is being siphoned off somewhere, and nobody knows where it's going, and there's no accountability. And it all gets back to this idea where you get a certain class of people who just think that the heavens intended all the money is to come to them, and any means that they can use to grab that money is a blessing from the invisible man who lives in the clouds. And it is that mentality that led the United States down this very, very sick, psychotic path where we gave up making products to make money, and we made money the product. And that was the doom of our nation right there.
Well, have a good weekend, Mike. I bought a bunch of champagne. When the government collapses, I'll be celebrating.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I got a bottle of. It was on sale. I got it stashed in the closet somewhere. Anyway, thank you very much. We got another caller on the line, John from Canada. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, I'm puzzled. Obama has told us that he can't be convicted as an American war criminal by the laws on our books because it's not a war against Libya, this indiscriminate killing. More than 10,000 times they've bombed the country. They've robbed the banks. They're funding Al-Qaeda. There's no commitment to justice in that region. And he says the authority he exercises is not America's, but the UN. The UN sanctioned this attack. And yet the UN didn't sanction the attack. They said, Gaddafi, you call a ceasefire or Obama will kill people in your country. Obama called a ceasefire. That's why Obama is convicted on this crime and should hang. And there isn't a grunt in this world who would disagree with me. They're only cowards who play pretend. There's another side to that. Don't listen to that guy on the radio who insists that Obama be arrested immediately for war criming our peoples. Human rights investigations have brought forward the evidence that Press TV has reported on, where, if you can believe this, the cluster-dud landmines that were dropped in Misrata were dropped by NATO. And if we look back a couple of months when that took place, all the newspapers are saying this is why you got to support the war against this genocidal maniac. Hitler called these crimes genocidal. And to think that somebody in the Air Force dropped those bombs and then witnessed Obama and Hitler say those comments and didn't get on a guy like Alex Jones' show to demand justice for our days. Instead, more people suffer and die.
Well, it did come out in the long run. It came out in the long run where the bombings that were being done by NATO that were killing civilians were blamed on Gaddafi. And, of course, we understand that truth is always the first casualty of any war. But Obama has already exceeded the original United Nations mandate, which seems to happen everywhere we go in, saying, oh, we're doing this on, the United Nations resolution. And then, of course, anytime the United Nations won't do what the United States won't, it's unilateral. We've got to do this on our own. The track record is there. The United States is desperate to try and solve its economic problems by igniting the next world war. And if you sit there and let them do it, you deserve everything that's going to happen to this country, which is going to look a lot like what happened to Germany when they lost the world war they started. So,
yeah, and
we're at that point right now. They're going to be in Syria in another couple of weeks.
Yeah, we are repeating history because this happened with the UN's attack against Iraq. Kofi Annan, 6 months after he quit, then he states it's a war crime, that Bush is in violation of the UN. But he didn't say anything for months while the conflict was raging. Similarly with Libya, there's very few of any real human beings there defending our interests. They just think they got an excuse because we're supposed to be lost in the chaos here of uncertainty, to doubt the claims that they've actually done these crimes against innocent, defenseless others. And Obama says he's committed no unlawful act.
I have no doubt.
He's convicted by the public will.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt, and I am very certain we're looking at war crimes. One thing that we understand is when we find out that there has been a lie or deception about the war, in the case of Libya, the Viagra, or in the case of Iraq, George Bush's letter of transmittal to the U.S. Congress, March 13th, 2003, where he just lied about the reasons for war. Those lies invalidate any official sanction he may have from Congress or the United Nations. Because if you have lied in seeking this authorization from the United Nations or this resolution, then the resolution is invalidated immediately. And we already know we're looking at all these lies going on here. This is not a war for the benefit of the Libyan people. This is all about, getting rid of the gold dinar, which was basically going to take all of Africa out of the grip of the private central bankers. It's about that huge water irrigation system that Gaddafi built that Israel is lusting to put a spigot onto. It's about making the world safe for private central banking and debt-based currencies. It's about finding one more source of wealth to keep the pyramid going until it's somebody else's problem to deal with the crash.
Yeah, it's an escape strategy. They feel that it will not collapse immediately and put them in chains behind bars. But I think it will. I think we can get back our $27 trillion, no taxes for decades, put these guys where they properly belong, in prison, and we then, as a consequence, save our souls.
I wish it was so. I wish it was so, but
Right.
Unfortunately, the money that's been looted from this country is already gone because it was on paper to begin with, and it's on paper. We're not going to get it back. All I want is to just stop them from stealing from us from now on, and I will be happy. We got to take a break for news. We'll be back in about 7 minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to follow up on what my comment was to John in Canada just as we went to the news break. As much as we would like to daydream about it all, when the U.S. government and the U.S. economy collapses, okay, we will not all get refunds for the money that was taken from us. That's just not going to happen. The money has been taken away. It was all on paper. It's already spent. It's on wristwatches. $120,000 wristwatches on Wall Street wrists. The money is already gone to other places around the world. It's stashed in the Cayman Islands. The golden parachutes have been fully packed. What we need to settle for, agree on, to be realistic, what we're after is to get the bankers out of our pockets and tell them, take your riches and go away and leave us in peace. That's what's going to happen. Then we start to build the nation in a way that will serve ourselves and, more importantly, the subsequent generations. There will be no magic manna from heaven following the revolution. Things are actually going to be very, very difficult. But again, look at what happened to the Russian republics. The USSR fell. The Russian republics formed. They kicked out the oligarchs. That's the important thing that they did and why things are doing so well over in Russia right now. They got rid of the oligarchs. Sent them all back to Israel, which is why Israel's trying to get the U.S. to go to war against Russia. Because they're throwing another tantrum. You can't do that to us. The invisible man in the clouds will get you for that. Now, over at the International the International Monetary Fund, they're starting to scream about the United States debt. Now, we know what this all means. Okay, the IMF has cut its economic growth forecast for the United States and warns that it's playing with fire by not taking immediate steps to address the long-term debt. You know what this is? This is the entryway to that word, austerity. Austerity means you must make do with less so that we, the bankers, can have more. Because Congress, almost 100 years ago, Congress, who are now all dead after they got their goodies to play with, and President Woodrow Wilson, who is also dead, sold the American people and their children and grandchildren into the debt servitude of a privately owned central bank, issuing a debt-based currency. And with a debt-based currency, it is designed to be a trap, because all money in circulation is the proceed of a loan at interest to individuals, to businesses, and to the government. And the instant that first pretty printed piece of paper goes into circulation, more money is owed to that private central bank than actually exists. You can never, ever, ever pay off the debt by design. It is a permanent debt trap, and the debt just keeps going up and up and up through the magic of compound interest. And anything the government or the bankers do to try and increase the money supply also increases the debt by a wider, larger margin. Yes, we have created $5 billion in new funding here right now. Well, you've also created $5.5 billion in debt. That's the way it's set up. Now, it's a very arbitrary set of rules. It's like a religion. You know, money is not a real thing, especially this paper, non-backed money that we've been playing with for the last century and a half. Silver is real. Gold is real. Puka shells are real. Salt is real. Things that of value that we used to use as a medium of exchange, those things are real. But this paper money, this computer phantom money, it isn't real. It's a religion. It operates only so long as you are willing to believe in the arbitrary set of rules that the priests, the bankers, and it's not a coincidence. We've got priests molesting little kids, and we've got bankers molesting hotel maids. Kind of goes hand in hand if you think about it. As long as you are sucked into believing that these pieces of paper have some kind of real magical power or value, you will be under their control. But I think we're coming up in the wake of the crash that is happening all around the world right now. It's already started. The process is happening. We need to come to a new level of awareness that this idea of rule by compound interest is no more legitimate than rule by divine right, is no more legitimate than rule by chattel ownership of your body. We understand that rule by divine right is just a hoax and a fraud perpetrated on people dumb enough to believe in it. We understand now that chattel ownership of other humans is morally wrong and reprehensible, and it worked only because the owned humans believed that that was the way the world was supposed to be. And I think 50 to 100 years from now, we'll be looking back from another way of doing the world's economy that serves the people rather than the money junkies, and we will realize that this idea of a private central bank issuing a debt-based currency based on nothing but air was just as much a fraud and hoax and a tool of enslavement as rule by divine right and rule by chattel ownership of people. It's just another dodge to brainwash you into a sense of obligation to the rulers so that you will do what you're told to do. Do what I say because God has appointed me over you. Or do what I say because I own you. I have this piece of paper that says you are my property. Or do what I say or I'll foreclose your mortgage. It's all the same thing. It's the same tactic. It's enslavement. And it only works as long as you're willing to believe. That's why they work so hard when you're young, to brainwash you into allowing belief to control your brain. Believe in the fat man from the North Pole, you'll get a bicycle. Believe in the bunny rabbit, you'll get candy. Don't question, don't analyze, don't think, just believe. And as you grow up, your personality forms around those beliefs. And they become part of your identity. You become the thing that you're believed in. I am Christian. I am Republican. It takes a tremendous act of will to walk away from the beliefs that you're brainwashed with, that you're indoctrinated with. You can actually go through an identity crisis when you get rid of those beliefs. When you finally say, I don't think there really is this invisible guy up there in the clouds. And I don't think those people in Sodom on the Potomac are really working in my interest. And when you start walking away from those beliefs, you can go through kind of a weird, disoriented time of saying, okay, well, boy, if the things I believed in, turn out to be lies, who am I as a person? Then you wake up and realize, hey, I'm a free human being all of a sudden. Because beliefs are just another form of enslavement. No chains of steel ever bound a human being tighter than the chains made of the beliefs with which we are indoctrinated with as children. Belief in divine beings, belief in benevolent government, belief in pretty printed pieces of paper. It's all a mechanism of control and enslavement so that you will go out and hate the people you're told to hate and kill the people you're told to kill when you're told to kill them. That's what it's all about. Oh, and when you're not busy killing other people, we want you to build this really cool pyramid, to our everlasting glory so we can stand up there and say, we're king of the world. By the way, if you are building a pyramid for the money junkies to say they're king of the world, make sure that stone at the very top is really loose. And then take a video as they come bouncing down the side and put that on YouTube. I think we'll all get a laugh out of that. So anyway, the IMF is warning the United States on debt, that we must do something to deal with the debt. And then on the same breath, they turn around and they tell the Congress, you've got to raise the debt limit. You've got to go further into debt, or we won't trust you anymore. So we're getting this double message. Now, from the point of view of Congress, the message they're getting is, yeah, borrow more money from us, take more money from your people to give to us, and, start selling us the property of the people. This is a big sticking point over there in Greece, I might add. And basically turn the American citizens into tenants on what used to be their own country. That's what this is all about. But once you understand that the way the private central bank and debt-based currencies are set up is to guarantee perpetual increasing debt, then you understand that there's really only one solution. It's the one that Andrew Jackson did, which is you shut it down. You go to the bankers, you say you are a den of vipers. You're making yourselves rich on the labor of the ordinary people, and it's over. Take your money, go away. Or you do it the way Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy did. You invoke your constitutional authority as President of the United States to issue a government currency free from accumulating interest debt for the public to use. Lincoln and Kennedy both did it. And almost immediately after they were assassinated, their government-issued currency was withdrawn from circulation. And Congress plunged all the people back into the debt servitude of the private bankers. We're not a free people. Free people have a right to say no. We have a right to say no when the government goes out and borrows trillions of dollars to give to the bankers. Or takes trillions from the American people to give to the bankers to loan back to the people at interest. That's what these bailouts were. We're going to take $1 trillion from the American people, give it to the bankers so the bankers can loan it back to the American people at interest. Why didn't you just leave it in the hands of the American people? Because the goal is to save the bankers. You don't count. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We got a bunch of phone calls piling up here, and we have Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you going?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
I just had a really basic question. I've been with you for a long time, and you are basically my guru, and I thank you. But while I'm more inclined to listen to Claire's music than I am to read Cosmos by Carl Sagan, I just need some basics.
I'm going to tell Claire you said that, by the way.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, she's brilliant. So, but
yes, she is.
But just, I mean, if they, one thing I've wondered is if they can just print it up, why do they need to steal it from us?
Because if they
the
just
money
print
I'm
it up,
talking about.
Yeah, I know, and the reason is very, very simple. If they print it up, then it gradually becomes more and more worthless, including all the money they've already got in their pockets and their vaults and their bank accounts. And so the idea is, they print it up, they pour it in at the top on themselves to spend, and then they have to scavenge it back at the bottom in order to keep the value of the individual dollars up. Back when money was coined in silver and gold, there was an automatic guard against that kind of inflationary pressure. But once we started this hideous experiment with paper currency or computer currency, which is a very, very recent development in the history of commerce, there was no limit on the amount of money that could be put into circulation. And when people started just printing up these worthless banknotes, it can go out of control, as we saw in the Weimar Republic. And so the reason to not print up more money is to keep the money that the wealthy already have worth something. What the wealthy want is for their money to be worth more, at least in terms of the labor of the American people. And that's one of the motivations for driving down salaries and wages, is so the rich can buy more of us with the same amount of money. Because all money is sort of solidified power and authority to control other people.
Right. I just thought that, even if they, weren't milking us for the last bit, then they could just still, not literally print it, but just, put a couple more digits in the computer in their accounts or something,
Well, it would be nice if they put a couple more digits into our accounts, and goodness knows my account could use it because there's only one digit in there, and it's getting lonely. But no, the reason they don't create, the reason they're resistant to simply printing up more money to inflate the debt away is because it takes real purchasing power away from everybody in the system, including the rich. And that, of course, is very, very upsetting to them. It's already happening. Most of the very wealthy people who are able to have already converted as much of their dollars into other currencies as possible, or they're buying gold and silver, which is a really good way to immunize yourself from the runaway inflationary spiral.
Well, is it an ego thing as well then, I guess?
Well, there's a lot of ego that drives the monetary system. Again, the people who are at the top of that, they see themselves as shapers and movers of the world. And I think one of the reasons why we can expect some incredibly reckless and bad decision-making in the coming weeks is because these people are not used to the idea that they're not in control of the United States and even the world economy. And as things start to come apart and they realize that they are not masters of their own fate like they thought they were, and they could, in fact, wind up facing very, very angry populations, as has already happened in Iceland and Egypt, is now happening in Greece, et cetera, they may make some really stupid and dumb moves that may look good for the next 30 minutes, but be incredibly bad for the long term.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so if we've got some cash in the bank, you say take it out and turn it into gold?
Canned foods and shotguns has always been my standard recommendation.
I've got plenty of that, lad. I've got plenty of that. I'm just wondering about any extra, green.
Well, no, gold and
there,
silver, is a good way to bribe yourself across a border because, those security guards, they're hungry too. But in all seriousness, as we look at the possibility of a collapse, you really want to get practical. You want to have, basic farm tools, emergency equipment, candles, canned food, that kind of stuff. Imagine, just being disconnected from the rest of society for 3 to 4 weeks. And just be prepared to deal with that. You can't eat gold and silver. Gold and silver is pretty, I will grant you. And my wife seems to smile when I put some of it on her. But in the end, when we're talking about a transition between the current social state and whatever we're going to create for ourselves afterwards, we're going to have to be really, really self-sufficient for a while. We need to learn how to live as if we don't have a government. We may actually discover that we like it, too. They're going to find that out up in Minnesota because Minnesota's government's about to shut down, I think, on the 1st of the month.
Right, lad, right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, you got that, and we're going to switch over to Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just got in, but hey, I got a couple things. You know, Mike, it's amazing how we bailed Greece out first of the year, and now they're over there rioting again, setting things on fire and dead again. I wanted to say that, you know what, my wife and I were talking today.
Can I back up here a second? Scott,
Okay.
Can I back up here a second? We didn't bail them out. We plunged them further into debt. That's why they're upset. Remember what I said about a debt-based currency. All these bailouts are just another loan with more interest tacked on. It's not a gift. It's not a bailout. It's basically, at best, it's a refi. We'll stretch out the payments longer, but you owe us more interest. It's not resolving the debt crisis. It's prolonging it and increasing it. They use the name bailout because it sounds like we're doing them a favor, but we aren't.
Well, I understand that, Mike, but here, me and my wife were talking today, and the government created this debt, and, you know, my wife was talking about getting behind on a few bills, you know, and I come up with a suggestion. I said, maybe I'll talk to Mike tonight, and what if you could paste Mr. Fearless Man's address at Washington, and all the people in America that's behind on their bills, send them into Washington so he can pay them. And I bet you will fill the White House up, huh?
Oh, I'm sure
I thought
that we
I'd get you to laugh. But seriously, if everybody in this nation that's behind on their houses, their cars, and that, get his address, they're the one that created this debt. Let's pack the mail, baby, send it all into Washington. And
I like that idea. We got to take a break.
White House, so.
We got to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm probably going to skip down my talking points. We're a little behind, and I got a lot of stuff I really want to get to here. As I mentioned in the last segment, Minnesota is preparing for a possible government shutdown because they've simply run out of money, and they weren't able to slap around their public worker union the way they wanted to. So I think what's going to happen is the Minnesota state government's going to shut down, and all of a sudden the Minnesotans are going to realize, you know, our lives are actually a lot simpler and more pleasant without the state government, and they'll brick up the state house, and that'll be kind of the end of that. And seriously, as I mentioned in the last segment, start preparing to live your life as if you don't have a government. Disconnect from everything. Just be self-sufficient. Be independent. To be independent means to not be forced to be interdependent on all your neighbors. All dictatorships work to lock the population into being dependent on everybody else. You can't eat because these people over here are growing the food and these people here are trucking it to you. You may not grow your own food. That's what I mean by enforced interdependence, and we got to stop doing that. Which reminds me, I just had this come to my memory. Last night, there was this incredible show on History's International Channel, and I got it on the DVR, and it was called The Prophets of Doom. And it was a roundtable discussion by these 6 prognosticators, and I don't mean people with crystal balls. We're talking academics, serious scientists, economists, biologists, various other, disciplines, and they were talking about what they see happening to the United States and the world in the immediate future. We're not talking about in 5,000 years. They're talking about immediate concerns, stuff that is about to happen right now. And what was kind of eerie is they're, with few exceptions, they were basically saying the same things that we've been talking about here on this radio show for the last going on 4 years now, and certainly at our website for going back, well, almost 18 years now. Boy, if my website was a human being, it would be old enough to drive. So if you have History International Channel, you may want to look for this show. It's called The Prophets of Doom. It is a very serious analysis of current trends, and it is well worth watching and grabbing on your DVR. And probably if you have a digital cable box, you get History's International Channel. If you're on the regular analog cable, probably not. You get just the regular domestic History Channel, which is a little more biased toward the American point of view about things. Alrighty, let's see. Detroit school employees are getting layoff notices at the same time that Obama has authorized $4 billion to touch up the paint on the B-61 nuclear bombs, and he's hoping it won't upset the Russians. Yeah, when you start polishing the weapons, the big weapons, Russia's going to notice here. Alrighty, I want to skip on down here talking about nuclear reactors because the situation is just getting more and more bizarre out there. First of all, to touch on the situation with Fort Calhoun and the Cooper, Nebraska nuclear reactors, the water is, as of the last report, I think I mentioned this in the first hour, it's within 6 inches of basically breaching the sandbags and all the other things they have set up there and actually flooding the reactor buildings. The official story, nothing to worry about. It's going to be just fine. The flood waters can only go down from here. We already know that may not be possible based on the amount of huge snowpack that's up there in the Tetons. It's coming down the river. It's going to take just one overtopped earthen dam, and things are really going to start cascading. Now, very alarming story came out earlier today. We've got it linked to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. As you probably know, we reported a couple of days ago how the infant mortality rate in certain cities along the west coast of the United States of America had shot up by 35% in the 3 months since the Fukushima disaster, whereas the average for the rest of the United States was only 2%. And it was very alarming, and people were saying, is this because of the radioactivity coming from Fukushima? Nobody's really sure. Earlier today, we got this story where a Fox News affiliate, this is not some wacky, fringy, conspiracy nut website like whatreallyhappened.com. We're talking about the Fox News affiliate in Pennsylvania, and they're reporting on the fact there has been a 48% spike in Philadelphia infant mortality since they just started detecting radioactive iodine from Fukushima in their drinking water. 48%. That is just an absolute staggering increase in infant mortalities. And one of their city medical experts is saying that as far as they can tell, this is a result of the contamination getting into the water. And the water was, mixed up and fed to the babies with their food and the formula and everything else. And 48% spike in infant mortality since the Fukushima disaster. That is alarming in the extreme. Now, we have been getting this situation where when the disaster first happened in Japan, we were told, it's no big deal, it's going to be okay. And over time, they sort of let out a little more about how bad things are. We now understand that 3 of the Fukushima reactors melted down completely through containment, through pressure, all the way. Spent fuel rod pool reactor number 4, they can't keep liquid in it. It's cracked and broken. The whole building is leaning over. One more good level 8 aftershock, and that building's going to come down. When this all happened, and I was studying the radiation meters in Japan, I kept pointing out there are radiation spikes in other parts of Japan that nobody's explaining. There's a big one down at Ibaraki near the Tokai nuclear plant, which is their Japan's first nuclear power plant, and near this nuclear fuel processing plant, which prior to Fukushima was the location of Japan's worst civilian nuclear accident. Now we're finding out that at the Hamaoka nuclear plant in Shizuoka Prefecture, where they were basically saying, there's seawater is leaking into the reactor. They have now found 43 of the condenser pipes in the condenser that cools the steam used to drive the turbines from the reactor have been damaged. And 2 others are deformed. They're not saying what caused this, but there's damage to the condensers and cooling. Now, this is not the primary radioactive loop from the reactor, but it's still very alarming to see this scale of damage only now being revealed 90 days plus after the incidents. Meanwhile, on the other side of Japan, over on the west coast, there is a reactor, the Monju prototype fast breeder reactor in Suruga, Japan. It apparently has been in a state of shutdown because they've had a major mechanical failure there as well. They're trying to keep that one under control. So we have these reactors, not just Fukushima, but we've got Fukushima, something near Tokai, and these other 2, they're all having problems as well. It is starting to look like, despite all the protestations of defense in depth and safety and backup systems, that virtually every fission nuclear power plant in the world is operating in an extreme state of fragility. The line between safe operation and a major disaster seems to be extraordinarily thin, and we need to be worried about that. And we should be worried because the United States government is still insisting that even though the rest of the world is starting to say these fission reactors are too dangerous to the people to use, the U.S. government is still committed to building more of them here in the United States of America, using the General Electric design that caused such problems and failures over there in Japan. When we get back, I want to talk about one of our sponsors who has something that maybe you ought to be looking at, especially if you live in Nebraska. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about this sudden coming to realize that the state of the world's nuclear fission reactors appears to not be very good. We're hearing of more and more reactors in Japan that were compromised by the quake and the tsunami, and we're talking about reactors that were considerably far away from the epicenter that should not have been affected at all. And yet, apparently, they were. And obviously, a great deal of concern over these two nuclear reactors in the flooding river, in the flood zone of the rivers coming down out of that Missouri River drainage basin. There is a very real possibility. If there is a greater increase in water than the Army Corps of Engineers is officially saying there is, there could be some problems. We have had anecdotal stories, and I stress anecdotal, of people getting a strange metallic taste in their mouth in places like Seattle. That is very often an indication that you've had some iodine hit your tongue, just floating on the air and everything like that. Now, I know probably most of you already went out and got potassium iodide tablets. Those are something you should take when you know you've been exposed to a really serious radiation exposure. But there are things that you can do that will sort of protect you from radioactive iodine contamination that maybe you ought to be looking at right now, especially if you're in that Nebraska area, just in case. And it's simple stuff. Make sure that you're using iodized salt. What's the Morton with the girl with the umbrella? It says right on the package, iodized. It means iodine is added to it. So that's something that you can just have a little bit in your food. If you're on a salt-free diet, what you can do is go down to your local health food store and get kelp tablets, because those are a good source of iodine. And the idea is to saturate your body with iodine so that your body doesn't want to take any more iodine in. And that's how you basically prevent the contamination, because if your thyroid is already saturated with iodine, it won't settle there. One other thing you can do is take drops of medical iodine from your first aid kit. Just put a couple of drops on your skin, let it soak in. That will do it as well. And also, of course, we have a sponsor at our website, J. Crow's Lugol solution, which is also an iodine thing. And I was talking to Jeff earlier, and he said, yeah, just put a couple of drops on there, and that'll give you all the iodine that you need. And there's a little potassium in there as well. Yeah, there are other isotopes as well that you need to be concerned about. I don't have a ready solution for that. A lot of the chemicals that would help you deal with some of those contaminations are considered prescription only, and nobody can get them, like the Prussian blue right now. Nobody can get that. And be very, very careful playing with this stuff on your own, because some of the stuff is toxic. You can take too much of the potassium iodide. It can actually cause more harm than good. You've got to be very, very careful. But, like I said, kelp tablets, iodized salt, that's stuff that you got in your local supermarket. You can add it to your diet, and that's just one way that you can sort of, if things do go bad, that's one less thing you have to worry about. All right, moving right along here, let's see. Now, believe it or not, the carbon Nazis are still out there screaming about global warming. They've reacted to the revelation that we may be looking at a new Maunder minimum by saying, oh, no. An ice age is the product of global warming because the global warming puts more water in the air and then it falls more on the poles and then it becomes cold there and blah, 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 blah. Which, by the way, is not science. It's science fiction. That's the plot line to this movie, The Day After Tomorrow. And I remember having a lot of arguments with people working on that show about how bad the science actually was in the show. In that movie. So that's where that came from. It's not science, it's science fiction here. And, you prove me wrong. Take a pan of water, put it on the stove on low heat, and when it freezes over, you come call me and I will apologize. But the carbon Nazis are still out there trying to say, no, there's no ice age, it's warming, and you got to give us a carbon tax, and you got to do what we tell you, and everything. And now we saw this story. I linked it to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, where they're trying to propose ways to save the world from global warming. And they have this idea of huge, gigantic mirrors in the sky to reflect sunlight away from the Earth, to allow the Earth to cool, and what a wonderful boon this would be. And, of course, my comment would be, until you have that first meteor shower, then you will have, you will have 130, 285 meteors times 64,000 mirrors times 7 years equals a whole lot of bad luck. Can somebody actually seriously propose this thing, a gigantic mirror in space, and somebody put it in the newspaper without thinking, what happens when these meteor showers, which we get a dozen of them a year, regular as clockwork, and these big rocks are flying by, and, the people in the space station have to hide inside a special meteor-proof room to stay safe. And that's just a little tiny space station. When you're talking about these huge, gigantic mirror arrays, that's not really a very, very practical idea. And they're talking about dumping iron filings in the ocean. They already tried that one 3 years ago, and it didn't work. But they're going to come back because it's grant money, and it's global warming, and they're still out there. Now, the one bit of good news is the United States Senate voted to repeal all of the ethanol tax credits. All of these people trying to turn edible food into ethanol to put in your gas tank because it was carbon neutral. They were getting all these huge tax credits and subsidies. That's all over. And that is actually a good thing, because ethanol was a fad that sounded good. It was fashionable to be into ethanol, but it was never really thought all the way through, because aside from exacerbating the existing food shortages, ethanol is not carbon neutral. Once you tally in the carbon footprint of harvesting the plants and taking them to the factory and then processing them in the factory, there's a huge carbon footprint there. So this idea that the carbon that you put back into the atmosphere burning the ethanol matches the carbon that the original plant took back in is nonsense. Plus, if you left the plant there growing, it's going to take more carbon dioxide out of the air. Now, ethanol contains far less energy than gasoline, so people were having to buy and burn a lot more of it to do the same amount of work. And finally, as owners of older cars have already discovered, much to the dismay of their wallet, the soft components of the fuel systems of cars were never designed to work with these tiny alcohol molecules. They were designed to work with these very large, long-chain hydrocarbons. And so the ethanol began to wreck the fuel system on these older cars. The newer cars are designed to work with ethanol, but the older cars are not. Germany stopped ethanol in their country because it was wrecking the fuel systems on the cars. And the proponents were saying, but it's green, it's green. The ethanolistas are out there saying, it's green. Maybe what they meant is it was green as in the money they were making from all of this pointless exercise. Buy my ethanol instead of the gasoline. Don't give those evil oil companies your money. Give it to me because I'm green. But where I grew up, green means immature, inexperienced, and unprepared. And in that context, the ethanol and the people pushing it were definitely green. I don't know if you caught this story we ran earlier this week where somebody went in to look at these electric cars that everybody's saying, oh, they're green and they're emission-free. Actually not. Where does the electricity to charge them come from? A big old power plant fueled by oil or nuclear power, neither of which are good for the environment. But then they went in and they looked at the carbon footprint of making these high-technology exotic batteries to make these cars work, and they discovered, wow, what a huge carbon footprint. Worse than a conventional car and gasoline over the same lifespan and same mileage. Again, these things sound good. They make a good soundbite. People run out with their wallets to buy these things, but they're not really thought all the way through for their complete impact all across the globe. It's just money-making thing. We got a new thing. Everybody got to have the new thing. They're going to buy it, and they don't really think it all the way through. They never have here. So if it's true we're going to have a new ice age, then by golly, we've got to buy bigger cars. We've got to burn more fossil fuel. We've got to save the earth from Al Gore and Man-Bear-Pig by going back to the wasteful lifestyle. Of course, I'm joking. Wise use of resources. And I think we all should voluntarily have simpler, more austere, more environmentally friendly lives. I just don't want some guy living in a 27-room mansion with the carbon footprint of an entire village telling me how to live my life. You know, when I decide to do it, it's austerity. When they make me do it, it's poverty here. Now, speaking of not thinking all the way through about things, everybody was so caught up on this global warming and snow is going away and the rest of it. There was almost an institutional blindness to the evidence pointing in the other direction. We're now finding out there was a whole series of emails sent to the U.S. federal government in Washington, D.C., from along these rivers that are flooding now. And these emails were saying, this is a problem. We've got all this snow. We are going to have major, major problems unless you start taking care of it now. Like going up and pre-releasing water from the dams to lower the water in the dams so there's more room to catch the flood surge. And apparently the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers didn't pay attention. They were saying, oh, no, there's global warming. We don't have that much snow to worry about. There's not going to be much of a flood. And now they're kind of trapped because the dams are already at capacity, the spillways are at capacity, and the water seems to still be rising. There's a record snowpack up there on that mountains, and everybody's worried about this thing. And now we have these nuclear reactors in the way. Not thinking. They're not thinking. When you have politics dominating the science, you're going to have problems. We need to go back to a world where the politicians politic and the bankers bank and the people who are actually supposed to make the decisions about our lives and our health and our science are the scientists. And they've got to have the freedom to simply follow the science to its real conclusion and not be told that if you don't agree with Al Gore and his global warming thing, you will not get your funding next year. Because that's not science. That's politics wrapped in a white lab coat. And that is why we're in this mess that we're in. Last story, I'm going to probably have to go back to this again later this week. It is now being discovered. Emeritus Professor Don Huber from Purdue University is showing that genetically modified crops are containing their own internal pathogen that are causing deaths among livestock. 20% to as much as 55% of stock animals, cattle, and sheep are losing their offspring, miscarriage or spontaneous abortion. Chicken embryos are dying in 24 to 48 hours. This might be the real cause behind the honeybee colony collapse disorder. They rushed these technologies into commercial use without making sure that they were going to be safe. Just like they drilled in the Gulf of Mexico without making sure it was going to be safe. Just like they've got these nuclear reactors without making sure they're safe. It was all about the money, and it's coming back to haunt us. That's it for our show. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday here on the Rents Radio Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, hug your loved ones, be angry, be skeptical, and aloha, America.